Picture this. You're 72 years old, sitting alone at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and the only sound in the house is the refrigerator kicking on and off. In front of you is a yellow legal pad with three numbers written on it: Social Security, rent, Medicare supplement. I had circled the numbers so many times the paper was starting to tear. I remember holding a cold cup of coffee and thinking something I had never said out loud to anybody. I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of living long enough to go broke. That was the part nobody had prepared me for. I had done what people told me to do. I worked. I paid taxes. I kept a little money in a retirement account. I didn't buy boats or sports cars. I wasn't trying to live like some millionaire. And still, at 72, I was looking at my life and realizing the arithmetic no longer worked. Not someday, not 10 years from now, right then. Every month I was starting a little further behind than the month before. My name is Walter Mercer. I'm 72 years old, born and raised outside Dayton, Ohio. I spent 38 years working in commercial building maintenance. Heating systems, electrical problems, leaking roofs, busted pipes, all the things people don't notice until they stop working. I was never rich, but for most of my life I felt useful. I could walk into a mechanical room, listen for 30 seconds, and usually tell you what was wrong. There was pride in that. There was also a paycheck every other Friday, and I did not appreciate how much security that little rhythm gave me until it was gone. My wife, Diane, died 6 years before I left the United States. Ovarian cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to funeral. We had been married 44 years. People like to say things such as, "At least you had all those years together." They mean well, but when somebody has been beside you for 44 years, the empty chair does not feel smaller because you were lucky before it became empty. It feels bigger. For the first year, I kept buying 2 bananas at the grocery store. I'd get home, see both of them on the counter, and remember there was nobody there to eat the second one. The medical bills were not the only thing that hurt us financially, but they were the beginning of the slide. Then the house needed a new roof. Then the property taxes went up. Then my pension, which was never large to begin with, stopped feeling large enough for anything. I sold the house because I thought downsizing would solve the problem. That's what everybody says, right? Downsize, simplify, cut expenses. So I moved into a one-bedroom apartment and gave my daughter most of the furniture. I figured I'd finally gotten sensible. The apartment was $1,285 a month when I moved in. 2 years later, it was $1,465. Then came the car insurance, utilities, groceries, prescriptions, phone bill, and the little surprises that don't sound like much until you add them all together. A battery for the car, a dental crown, new glasses, a copay, a heating bill after a cold January. It is amazing how small your world can become when every ordinary thing begins to feel expensive. I tried everything before I ever considered leaving the country. I canceled cable, switched phone plans, sold my pickup for an older Corolla, moved prescriptions to a cheaper pharmacy, and kept the thermostat at 64 in winter. I know, famous last words, but I really believed there had to be one more expense I could trim, and then everything would balance. It never balanced. That was the humiliating part. I had spent my whole adult life fixing problems, and I could not fix this one. My daughter offered to let me move into her basement. She and her husband were kind about it. They had a finished room down there, a little bathroom, even a separate entrance. But I could hear what she wasn't saying. They had 2 teenagers. They both worked. Their house was already full. I imagined myself becoming one more responsibility on a list that was already too long. Maybe that was pride, maybe it was fear, probably both. One night I drove over there for dinner, and my granddaughter was doing homework at the kitchen table. My daughter was packing lunches for the next day. Her husband was answering work messages. Everybody was moving around me, busy with the life they were still building, and I had this sudden picture of myself 5 years later sitting in that basement waiting for somebody upstairs to need me. It scared me more than I expected. I didn't want to become invisible in the house of people I loved. The Philippines entered my life because of a man named Ed, who used to work second shift with me. We had not talked in years. One afternoon, he commented on a photo my daughter posted online, and I clicked his profile. There he was, sitting at an outdoor table in a t-shirt, grinning in front of green hills. I sent him a message asking where he was. He wrote back, Tagaytay, Philippines. Retired here 3 years ago. Best move I ever made. I almost laughed. The Philippines? At 72? By myself? I was not the adventurous one in our marriage, Diane was. I was the guy checking the hotel safe and asking whether we had enough time to get to the airport. The idea that I would move halfway around the world sounded ridiculous. But I kept thinking about Ed's message. So I did what lonely retired men do when they don't want to admit they are considering a major life decision. I watched YouTube. One video became 20. Retirees talking about rent, grocery shopping, condos, visas, rainy season, power outages, traffic, hospitals. I trusted the ones who admitted when things went wrong because they sounded like people instead of salesmen. Then I found expat forums and Facebook groups. That changed things. I saw ordinary people asking ordinary questions. How much is internet? Which neighborhoods are noisy? What documents should you bring from home? These weren't rich people living in beachfront villas. A lot of them were living on the same kind of monthly income I had. Some had less. For the first time in years, I saw numbers that did not make my chest tighten. I made a spreadsheet. Of course I did. Old maintenance guy, remember? I had columns for rent, food, transportation, insurance, utilities, visa costs, emergency savings. I built a generous version and a lean version. I added 20% because everything costs more than somebody on the internet claims. I did not count on miracles. I did not count on getting a girlfriend. I did not count on some business opportunity. I wanted to know one thing. Could I live a decent, independent life on the money I already had coming in? And the answer looked like yes. Not luxury, not some endless vacation, just yes. A normal apartment, fresh food, a little help if I needed it, money left after the bills. That last part almost made me suspicious. Money left after the bills. I had forgotten what that felt like. I kept reopening the spreadsheet because I thought I must have missed something. My daughter hated the idea at first. She didn't yell. I almost wish she had. She just stared at me and said, "Dad, you're 72. What happens if you fall? What happens if you get sick? What happens if somebody takes advantage of you?" Every question landed because they were the same questions I had asked myself. I told her I wasn't buying property, lending money, marrying anybody, or burning bridges. I was going for 3 months first. If I hated it, I would come home. That 3-month test was important. I did not sell everything. I put documents in order. I gave my daughter copies. I kept enough money set aside for a flight home. I researched travel insurance and healthcare options for the trip. I had a list of medications, prescriptions, emergency contacts. I was scared, but fear feels different when you've made a plan for it. It stops being a fog and becomes a checklist. I arrived in Manila on a humid evening with one suitcase, one carry-on, and the kind of exhaustion that makes airport signs look like riddles. The air felt thick. Cars were everywhere. Horns, headlights, people moving in every direction. For about 20 minutes, I thought I had made the stupidest decision of my life. Then the driver I had arranged held up a sign with my name on it, took my bag, and we headed south toward Tagaytay. The first thing I noticed as we climbed was the air changing, cooler, softer. By the time we reached Tagaytay, it was late and I could smell rain on concrete. The guest house had a little covered terrace, potted plants, and a view that disappeared into darkness. I slept 9 hours. The next morning I walked outside with coffee and saw the green ridge dropping away toward Tal. I just stood there. I had seen pictures, but pictures do not give you the cool breeze on your forearms or the sound of tricycles in the distance or the smell of somebody cooking garlic nearby. My first apartment was not glamorous. That was exactly what I wanted. 1 bedroom, tiled floors, a small balcony, decent internet, and a basic kitchen. The rent was 22,000 pesos a month, which at the time worked out to roughly $380. 22,000 pesos. About $380. I remember looking around that apartment and laughing because the number felt impossible after what I had been paying in Ohio. There were trade-offs. The water pressure was weaker than I was used to. Dogs barked at strange hours, and traffic on Aguinaldo Highway could turn a short trip into a long one. I learned quickly that living somewhere is not the same thing as vacationing there. That actually reassured me. I did not need paradise. I needed a place where the problems were manageable and the math worked. I built a routine. That saved me more than the cheap rent did. I woke early, made coffee, and walked before the roads got busy. Twice a week I went to Mahogany Market. The first few visits I probably paid more than I needed to because I was still learning. One vendor started recognizing me and telling me how to cook vegetables I did not know the names of. Half the time I understood. Half the time I smiled and hoped for the best. There is a particular loneliness that comes after losing a spouse. It isn't simply being alone. I had been alone in Ohio. The difference was that everything there reminded me of the life that had ended. The grocery store where Diane bought flowers, the road to her doctor's office, the restaurant where we celebrated anniversaries. Even the weather had memories in it. In Tagaytay, nothing belonged to the old life. At first that felt disorienting. Then it started to feel merciful. I met people slowly, not in some dramatic movie way. A retired teacher from California. A Filipino couple in my building who invited me to a family birthday. A widower from Arizona who told me never to make a major financial decision in the first year. I wrote that one down. The biggest surprise was how much dignity came back when I stopped being frightened of every bill. That sounds shallow until you've lived the opposite. I could buy a proper meal without calculating whether I needed to skip something next week. I could replace a broken pair of sandals immediately. I could take a taxi on a rainy afternoon without feeling guilty. I could send my granddaughter a birthday gift and not spend the next 3 days wondering whether I had been irresponsible. My monthly budget was not fixed down to the peso, but most months I spent around 75,000 to 85,000 pesos once I was settled, depending on travel, health care, eating out, and little extras. I still watched my money. I still kept emergency savings separate. I still had months where something unexpected came up, but I was no longer losing ground just by existing. That distinction changed my whole posture. I stopped waking up at 3 in the morning doing arithmetic. I wish I could tell you my daughter became comfortable with it immediately. She didn't. For the first 6 months, she asked whether I was coming home almost every time we spoke. I could hear the worry in her voice, so I made a point of being predictable. Video call every Sunday. Message when I traveled somewhere overnight. Copies of important documents updated. I gave her my landlord's number and the contact information of 2 friends. I wanted her to see that moving abroad did not mean disappearing. About 8 months in, she visited. That visit mattered more than anything I could have told her. She saw the apartment. She walked the neighborhood with me. She met the people who knew my name. We ate lunch overlooking Taal, and she watched me order food, ask questions, joke with the waiter, handle my own day. That evening she sat on the balcony and said, "You seem more like yourself here." I had to look away for a second because I did not trust my voice. What I had not realized was how much shame I was carrying in America. I thought needing a cheaper life meant I had failed at retirement. I thought a man who worked almost 40 years should be able to stay in the same country, in the same kind of life, until the end. Maybe that is how it should be. I don't know. What I do know is that being angry about the numbers did not change them. I had to choose between defending an idea of how retirement was supposed to look and actually building a life I could afford. There are things I miss. My daughter, my grandchildren, autumn in Ohio, a proper diner breakfast. I miss knowing exactly how every system works back home. Here, I still have moments when I am the confused old foreigner holding the wrong form at the wrong counter. Humility is part of the price. I also do not want anybody hearing my story and thinking the Philippines is automatically cheap, easy, or right for every retiree. It isn't. You need a cushion. You need a plan for health care. You need to understand visa rules and keep them current. You need to rent before you even think about buying anything. You need to be careful with money and relationships. And if somebody appears in your life with an urgent financial emergency 2 weeks after meeting you, you should keep your wallet closed and your eyes open. But caution and fear are not the same thing. I had confused them for years. Caution asks questions. Fear closes the door before you know what is on the other side. I nearly let fear make my decision for me. I nearly moved into my daughter's basement because it seemed like the respectable, sensible thing to do. Maybe I could have been comfortable there. Maybe we would have made it work. But I know myself. I would have felt like I was shrinking. Here, I'm still an old man. Nothing changed that. My knees hurt on stairs. I take pills every morning. I need brighter light to read small print. I sometimes forget why I walked into a room. Moving countries did not make me young. What it gave me was room, financial room, emotional room. Room to wake up and decide what the day is for instead of spending the first hour worrying about what the day will cost. A few weeks ago, I was sitting at a small table on my balcony while rain moved across the ridge. It was late evening. The power had flickered once, the air was cool, and somewhere below me somebody was singing karaoke badly enough that I started laughing. I had a mug of coffee in my hand. Not good coffee if I'm being fair, but hot. I looked at the little notebook where I still track my monthly expenses, and I realized I had not opened it in 4 days. That sounds like nothing. To me, it was everything. I thought back to that kitchen table in Ohio. 2 in the morning, the refrigerator humming, 3 numbers on a yellow legal pad. I can still feel the cold coffee in my hand and that pressure in my chest. I remember thinking I had reached the part of life where choices only got smaller. Sell the house, cut the cable, stop driving, move into the basement, need less, ask for less, become less. Instead, at 72, I got on an airplane. I did not leave America because I hated it. I did not leave because I was chasing some fantasy. I left because I could see the road I was on, and I did not like where it ended. I wanted to keep my independence. I wanted to buy groceries without fear. I wanted my daughter to be my daughter, not my caretaker. I wanted whatever years I had left to feel like years I was living, not bills I was surviving. Maybe someday I will go back. I don't make promises about forever anymore. Forever is a young person's word. I think in seasons now. This season, I am here. I wake up to cool Tagaytay mornings. I buy vegetables from people who recognize me. I call my family on Sundays. I keep enough money set aside for emergencies and a ticket home. I am careful. I am grateful. And for the first time since Diane died, I am not waiting for the next expense to tell me what kind of life I am allowed to have. If you had told me at 65 that I would spend my 70s in the Philippines, I would have said you had the wrong man. I was cautious, predictable, the guy who checked the locks twice before bed. Maybe that is why this still surprises me. I did not become a different person to do this. I just finally used the part of me that had spent a lifetime solving problems. I looked at the numbers, admitted the old solution no longer worked, and tried another one. 72 years old, 22,000 pesos in rent, a little balcony in Tagaytay, rain on the concrete, coffee going cold in my hand again, only now for a different reason. I'm too busy looking out at the life in front of me to remember to drink it.